There's a drive way back. It might be. It could be. It is. Holy cow. Welcome to another broadcast of Bricks Behind the Ivy.
Hey, Cub fans! Welcome to another episode of Bricks Behind the Ivy. I am always your host, Jeff Candid Cubs Rogowskis, and this is a very special edition of Bricks Behind the Ivy. Happy 4th of July! By the time you're listening to this, it'll be the 5th of July, which actually happens to be my birthday, so happy birthday to myself, which is kind of weird now saying out loud, but we're live from inside the Candid Cub Cave right before I go watch fireworks with my family. So this will be an abbreviated intro this week. But even with an abbreviated intro, there's always time to say thank you to my favorite sponsors in the whole world, Wrigleyville Sports. Wrigleyville Sports brings you the best of Chicago sports gear in Wrigleyville. Yes, a family-owned business since 1990. They are the absolute best. They have custom jerseys, custom Cub stuff, hat collaborations with different social media folks. They've got it all. They've got Bears, Bulls, White Sox, and we don't need that, Cubs stuff, and they are right in the heart of Wrigleyville, so check them out today. And with July, we actually have a brand new coupon code, IVY10. Use that at checkout to get 10% off of your order at Wrigleyville Sports. And thank you so much for continuing to be a sponsor of Bricks Behind the Ivy. So I'm testing some new technology right now as I want to make a very quick and exciting announcement that I will be attending the All-Star game this year. Yes, I am going down to Arlington to cheer on the potential one Cubs member who makes the All-Star team. It is a tradition with one of my best sports friends in the whole world that we go to the Home Run Derby. So I'll be going down there. Hopefully we'll have some Bricks Behind the Ivy stuff, maybe even some Bricks Behind the Ivy merch on me to be passing out and spread the good word of this podcast. And also going to be attending the John Boy Media All-Star Game party to mingle with some folks. Very much looking forward to it. And hopefully we'll get to make some pretty cool content for all of you as well. So this is actually kind of turned into a little bit of a walking tour of the Candid Cub Cave where you can see a little bit more. I don't want to show too much as it's a little messy right now as I'm doing some additional curating, but this week we have seen the Cubs continue to struggle. They did win today on the backs of a 2-home run and a double 6 RBI day from Ian, the daddy, Hap Daddy Hap, which Boog Sciambi finally told the story on the marquee the other night of where that came from. And it had come from Theo Epstein. He was interviewing Theo Epstein for something, and Ian Happ was going to come to the plate during spring training. He's like, hold on, I'll answer that question after we see the Hap Daddy hit. And that's where it's from. I was so excited to finally hear that story. So awesome, so cool, knowing that that nickname has come from the man himself, Mr. Theo Epstein. So, Bricks Behind the Ivy this week. Cubs are still struggling, but I wanted to take a quick moment to talk about my experience with baseball on the 4th of July and my experience as a Cubs fan. I have followed the Cubs my entire life, and it is just as much indoctrinated in my family. It's in my blood. I bleed blue. This team is my favorite thing. Baseball is my favorite thing, if it's not apparent by all of the things in my basement. But there has been a lot of negativity around the team, and a lot of it is, rightfully so, given the market size, the amount of money that people spend, the loyalty the fans have for this team. I can see where the frustration comes from, but I'm not going to kind of kowtow to the negativity. I'm not going to provide any clickbaity type content. Bricks Behind the Ivy is a Cubs podcast for Cub fans by Cub fans, as we have in our slogan, and we'll be providing coverage of the team as the season continues with additional coverage around what happens and how this team potentially pivots. And we'll continue with, after this week, the box score blitz. And we'll continue with covering the day-to-day, the standings, and pointing out things that are pertinent and interesting about this team as the season goes on. We'll have different content as the off-season starts, including some suggestions we got from our Wrigleyville Sports collaboration giveaway, including Cubs history, additional Cub-type guests, and additional Cub fan features. So stay tuned for that as Bricks Behind the Ivy continues to chug on. But this week, we decided we're not going to do the box score blitz. Just give everybody a break of hearing about frustrating Cubs losses, and also give myself some extra time with my family as it is 4th of July. And we did get a very special guest for this week. Brendan King, the play-by-play announcer for the South Bend Cubs, another fellow Southside Chicago Cubs fan, as I found out. Super cool. He joined me this week to talk about the state of the team, which we recorded last week, thoughts on some of the randomness, the performance thus far, and how to move forward. And then we also talked about some guys at South Bend that we're seeing in the South Bend Cubs experience. And it was really cool because we had a conversation about Ed Howard and how he was getting healthier. And he had said that a home run was coming super soon. And literally like a day after we recorded, Ed Howard hit his first home run of the season. I believe it was at the game that Crawley ended up being at, if you follow him on social media. So without further ado, thanks so much for listening to Bricks Behind the Ivy. Happy 4th of July. Hope you had a great 4th. Hope you stayed safe. Hope you're having a nice, long holiday weekend. But without further ado, here is Brendan King, the play-by-play guy of the South Bend Cubs. Check it out.
And here's the 1-2. He got him looking on a fastball down the middle. And triple digits on the Four Winds Field speed gun there. 100 miles an hour. And that's a legit 100. Killian pumping in triple digits. First pitch. Driven in the air towards deep left field. Back it goes to the wall. It's Johnson there. Cubs win. Walk-off home run, Brian Palmer. Cubs win it 4-2. Palmer mobbed at the plate. It's his second homer of the season, the first at Four Winds Field. Cubs win.
Hey, Cub fans. Thanks for sticking around. Today we have a very special guest. We have Brendan King, the play-by-play and official voice of the South Bend Cubs, Cubs High A affiliate. Brendan, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, I always love getting, people's stories in the Cubs organization of how they fell in love with baseball, or if they're Cub fans, how they fell in love with the Cubs. So what's your Cubs story?
Man, it goes back a long way. I think obviously have to start. I'm a Cubs fan thanks to my grandma, Kathleen. Everybody called her Kay, and we were just talking off the air. We are both Southside Chicagoans. So I think both of our Cubs stories kind of starts in unique fashions where it was a little improbable because on our block, it was White Sox jerseys and flags everywhere. But my grandma, Kay, was a diehard Cubs fan. I'll never forget in my grandfather's house growing up, there was a signed little Wrigley Field postcard from Rick Sutcliffe.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Every time I went over to their house, I would look at it, and it's cool. My parents now have that in their basement. So that's kind of a little unique item that I've got to see as a kid, and now I see anytime I go visit my folks. But, yeah, I think the story starts. I attended my first game when I was 2 or 3, and that went to the Cubs era and really where I grew up. I'm 29, so I think, 2003 was kind of just the start of it. Obviously, remember being heartbroken. But Ramos Ramirez, Derek Lee, Mark Pryor, Kerry Wood. Then the era goes into the Reed Johnsons and the legend, Darwin Barney when I was in high school. So yeah, I think, attending Wrigley, and I'll never forget, I got to take a tour of Wrigley when I was in high school. I did some broadcast work with the Chicago Bandits, and it was a high school-based broadcast crew that I worked with for the Bandits, and they invited us for a tour at Wrigley, and it was pre-scoreboard, it was pre-renovation. Actually, the Toyota sign had just gone up in left center, so that's kind of the era. I'll never forget, they brought me up to the broadcast booth. Len Casper was getting ready for that day's game, and Len invited us in the booth, and that's the moment that I can look back on and say, you know what, that's what I always knew I wanted to be a broadcaster, and I always wanted to get into it, but sitting with Len in the broadcast booth and watching him prep for a Cubs game while the organ's going and while the place is filling up, I'll always remember that moment as that kind of clicked, and that's what really meant a ton to me as a Cubs fan.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It's funny, just a lot of the players you name are in what we call the Candid Cub Cave, the basement of my house. They're all on. I have a Cubs Wall of Fame over there of my favorite players, and almost every one of the players you just named are in the Candid Cub Hall, and I think I should probably let those players know the high honor they've gotten of a plaque in a basement in the south suburbs. I'm sure that trumps the Hall of Fame for a lot of them. But yeah, that's really cool, especially Len Casper, who, is such a great voice in this game. Cubs were very lucky to have him, and been a lot of really great voices. And now you get to kind of add your name, to that pedigree of, the great voices in this organization. That's got to feel extra special.
Well, thank you. I definitely don't put myself up to the Pats and the Boogs and the Lens, but it's to even be in that conversation as to be a broadcaster within the organization is amazing. I started broadcasting at Lincoln Way East, where I went to high school, and I quit playing baseball my sophomore year to focus on being in the booth because Lincoln Way East is a big enough school where there was a radio and television club, and they let the kids broadcast the games, football, basketball, baseball. So they were looking for a new football guy my freshman year. I was like, hey, that sounds cool. And where the broadcasting heritage kind of goes back to, my grandfather worked in the advertising business in the 50s and 60s and worked in the city with the Blackhawks and the White Sox and the Cubs. So he knew the Jack Brickhouses of the world. He knew the Lloyd Pettits of the world. He knew some of the great voices that the city of Chicago has ever known. So from those stories and from my grandmother taking me to games, that's where really things kind of came full circle. And it's cool. I mean, these last few years being in South Bend, Pat has become a mentor. Him and I spend a lot of time together talking on the phone, talking about the biz. Boog, the same thing. I still keep in close touch with Len. So, yeah, it's special. And, God willing, hopefully someday I can be, up there and be able to follow their greatness.
Yeah, you got to honor all of us Southside Cub fan kids and slide your way up and represent. So we feel like we've done our job in indoctrinating the enemy territory. But I want to. So with the establishment of Marquee, there's been additional opportunities for exposure for not just the higher affiliates of the Cubs, but South Bend as well. Has that been like a welcome opportunity to kind of flex a different muscle or get exposure? And what's that experience been like for you?
No question about it. And it's really been unique because I joined South Bend in 2018. My first year as a baseball broadcaster actually came out in the Cape Cod League when I was in college over at Butler. And then my first pro job was in Boise, Idaho, former Cub affiliate, actually. At the time in 2017, they were the affiliate of the Colorado Rockies. So it's really where I was able to cut my teeth and just get some experience calling games. And then lucky enough to join South Bend in 2018, won our first championship in 2019. So getting to be on the call of that was super special. And, then COVID hit. Things changed, was able to go broadcast. I live in Indianapolis in the off seasons, so was able to call games in 2021 during the pandemic for the Indianapolis Indians as one of their number 2 broadcasters, working with a guy named Howard Kellman. Guy's been there for 45 years, legend of the game. Learned a ton from him. And then the situation came up where I was able to come back to South Bend in 2022, working alongside Max Toma, and we got another title in 22, and been there since. To answer your question, the Marquee Network, that was a super, super important part of me deciding to come back in 2022, just to get that exposure because, for one, as a broadcaster, it gets you unreal reps, puts you in front of the Cubs fan around the state of Illinois, wherever that may be. And also, kind of just gets your name out there in a way, and it allows you to sort of connect with the org. It allows you to show off kind of the big prospects and what you know about them, and it also puts a face to the future of these Chicago Cubs at Wrigley Field. So, yeah, it's been super neat, and getting to share that experience with my family. I told you about my one set of grandparents, George and Kathleen. My other set of grandparents, Ada and Felix, they are actually from Italy, came over on a boat in 1952. They're on my mom's side. Diehard Cubs fans. So they fell in love with the Cubs the minute they stepped off that boat and came to Chicago. So I would go there after school all the time and, turn on WGN, turn on the Cubs game and watch it with my grandparents. What's been cool is, they're probably not the most technologically advanced people in the world, but they know that Channel 80 at their house is Marquee Sports Network. And I'll give them a buzz and say, hey, we're going to be on Marquee tonight. And sure enough, Channel 80 is on at the Izzy household, and they're enjoying it. So I think for both as a broadcaster, getting the experience, and as a, somebody's family means a lot to me. Being able to share that with them is super cool.
Yeah, no, that's really special. And, it's not the same thing, but it's been fun for my very diehard Cub family, to share this podcast and idea with them. And they've been supportive, and they're probably the only people in the Tinley Park area wearing a bunch of Bricks Behind the Ivy merchandise everywhere they go. They're like my walking billboards of support. So So I want to talk about the South Bend Cubs specifically, and then we'll shift to talking about the Major League Club. So South Bend Cubs, obviously a high A affiliate. There's a number of interesting prospects there. Some of them approaching the top 100 for the U.S. prospect listings, the MLB prospect listings. A lot of them in top 25 in the Cubs organization itself. Well, what guys would you say really stick out to you, and are guys that you would, implore our listeners to start paying attention to over at High A?
Well, I think it starts out the middle, because both Jefferson Rojas and Pedro Ramirez have adjusted to High A ball. I thought they would have a good year, but I didn't know that they would be this dynamic so quickly. It usually takes a little while, and understandably so, for a lot of international players to adjust to not only the full season game at High A, but also, this being in Tinley Park, and anybody that listens in the Midwest knows this, it's cold in the month of April and probably for the first half of the month of May. And randomly, we're in Appleton, Wisconsin. It's currently 68 degrees on June 27th. The Midwest is going to toss some doozies at you for sure. Now, nobody's complaining about this. This is gorgeous, but it can just vary by day by day. I mean, heck, we played 96 degrees last week in South Bend. So the point being, it can change on any given day. I have never seen two young international prospects like Jefferson Rojas and Pedro Ramirez adjust to the cold so well and play so well in the month of April. Pedro Ramirez set the South Bend Cubs team record for an on-base streak with 27 consecutive games on base in a row. That's the best by South Bend Cub ever. The South Bend Silverhawks had a guy that was better than that, but nobody's had a better run as a South Bend Cub. And Jefferson Rojas, back in the first month, he had a 17-game hitting streak. That tied the best mark in South Bend Cubs history as well. He was a game away from setting the all-time best, but he's tied up with him. It's him, Yohendrick Pinango, Roberto Caro, and a guy named Eloy Jimenez that have all had 17-game hitting streaks as a South Bend Cub. So, yeah, I think Jefferson and Pedro have been great. It always takes a little bit longer for the glove than the bat. They each have been terrific with the bat. The gloves have come around. To be honest with you, I really don't pay attention to errors or defensive plays in the first month. It's tough. It's their first time playing in the cold ever. And Usually the glove is, as mentioned, going to take longer than the bat. But now yesterday they turned a pair of beautiful double plays here in Wisconsin. So, I think to start with those two, both have been terrific.
So I'm going to stay in the theme of the region and interesting prospects in South Bend. Ed Howard. Obviously, he has spent a large amount of time of his time in the Cubs organization at South Bend. He's had some injuries and some setbacks. How do you think he's progressing? How does he look this year? Do you think there's still upside there? Does he compare to some of the good Cub prospects, or should expectations begin to be tempered about him? And just the cool story of like where he comes from and his connection to the city of Chicago.
I'll tell you, he's putting himself back on the map, and I'll never forget watching the injury happen. It was at home. It was a ground ball to short. The throw from shortstop was to the first base dugout side of the bag. For whatever reason, the first baseman for the other team stretched into the foul line to try and make the catch, and it ran right into Ed's hip, and it was just tough to watch. Last year, Ed coming back, you can tell he was coming off major hip surgery. No discredit to him. And you know what? I'll tell you what. Anybody else, I bet you $1, they wouldn't even be trying to be out there last year. But Ed came back and he put in the work and he got the work done to even put himself in the position to play half of last season. This year, I'll tell you, he looks like a new guy. Looks like a new guy because what's weird is, here's what I think about Ed. He's only 22 years old. So if Ed chose to go to college and chose to honor his commitment to the University of Oklahoma instead of being drafted by the Cubs in the first round, he would still just be coming out of college. It's interesting kind of how we look at that, where, okay, a guy's 22 coming out of college, he's just getting started, there's all this hope. Well, a guy's 22 when he was drafted when he was 18, suddenly everybody's down on him. I've never really understood that. I think everybody should have that window of 18 to 22 to develop, no matter if they're in college or in pro ball. However, I do understand that people want to see Ed Howard quickly move up the system. There's no question about it. But yeah, I mean, just to see how comfortable he has looked, he has grown into his body. He's become leaner. He's become taller. He has grown. And like I said, he's only 22. So I think what's most encouraging, not only is he batting .350 since the month of May ended, he's putting up numbers at the plate, but he's also, if you see him take batting practice, he uses the opposite field just about as well as anybody on this team. But now the line drives that he was hitting at the start of the year, just getting his timing back, the line drives are starting to turn into deep fly balls. And eventually those deep fly balls are going to get over the wall. He doesn't have a home run yet this year, but that's all going to come because not only, and this is probably the craziest thing that I've talked to Ed about, he had to teach himself basically how to walk again after that hip injury. So not only do you have to teach yourself how to walk, that's teaching yourself how to run, that's teaching yourself how to swing, that's teaching yourself how to move your hips in the swing. So you're starting from ground zero there. So I think now that we're talking 2 years after the initial injury, we're pretty much a year past the grueling part of the rehab. I think the month of July, that's super exciting because if Ed's putting up numbers right now, if he has a good month of July, that's kind of what I'm keeping an eye out for to tell us of what he can be in 2025.
Yeah, I think I'm going to keep an eye on him. I've been tracking him just out of interest and, just the pedigree and how high he was drafted and the really cool backstory with, the Jackie Robinson Little League team and being from Chicago. You just try to root for those stories just because very similar to the Bulls draft pick last night, a guy from Hinsdale, like local kid, likely playing for a team he potentially rooted for or grew up around. It just adds like a layer to the excitement. And yeah, I've been rooting for him. And I think there is definitely in the modern version of the game, there's this weird expectation that every player comes up and is Mike Trout. And it really just kind of discredits what Mike Trout is because nobody's Mike Trout but Mike Trout besides Shohei Ohtani, but no one's Shohei Ohtani besides Shohei Ohtani. So it's just, the game is very, very hard, and there's at times a lack of patience. And I feel like Ed Howard has received, some flack from the deeper ends of Twitter on him not being up. But yeah, it's what people are talking about now with PCA at the major league level, that he didn't go to college, and he just did Dansby Swanson's podcast and talked about like how different he felt like things would be if he had gone to Vanderbilt, like he had planned on going to play baseball. And yeah, the guys now, instead of taking swings in the College World Series, is like adjusting to major league pitching at 21 years old. Like you got to give it time. It's just not. Yeah, it's a different world. So
it is. It is.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I'm somebody that doesn't really believe that Twitter is the real world. I think Twitter is very fake.
You would be very correct.
I mean, I'm on Twitter. I use it. It's a nice tool, but I don't pay much attention to opinions and whatnot. I just wish. Here's what I wish. I wish those types of people could come to the park every day at 1:00 and just watch a full day. And then I wish they can repeat it and do it again and again and again and again 150 times and just see what that's like, but that's just not how it is.
No, exactly. It's, and this is a dynamite transition to the current state of the Major League Club and your thoughts on that. Obviously, at this moment in dating the podcast, expectations have not been met. There's been weird stretches and almost scripted endings to a lot of games, leading the league in one-run games, leading the league in blown saves, or close to leading the league in blown saves. And yeah, this was the year going in. The expectation was competing for the division, and they find themselves exactly at the halfway point, 11 games back and under 500. But I think that, from someone who tries to find the reasons and stuff, there are legitimate reasons around why this has happened. And, the Twitter universe is reacting with they don't care, they don't this, they don't that. And I would guarantee that if they had to say that to one of these players' faces, they'd get real quiet. Because that's not what's happening. There's not this trying to fix it type of situation. So given that long, eloquent slam of the current state of the Cubs, what are you seeing from a broadcaster's perspective? What is your thoughts on the Craig Counsell era and the current state of the Major League Club?
Yeah, I mean, it's the question, isn't it? I mean, I wish I could watch more full games. Unfortunately, usually I'm catching the 8th and 9th innings, which, as you said, have been tough. Have been tough, but it is really challenging because you know what? I'm going to mention a name that may not be brought up with some of the big stars, but I think it really hurt them from the start. I think the Julian Merriweather injury,
100%
from the start. He was going to be maybe not the guy, but he was going to be one of the guys to get it. And then with Alzolay struggling and then getting hurt, with Neris kind of put in that situation, I feel terrible for Hector Neris. You know what? That's such a tough situation when you are a great big league pitcher and you've had success over the years and you're put in that spot. And listen, would he like to have those pitchers back? 100%.
Yeah.
But, when you're relied upon that day in and day out, I just don't think people truly understand it. But at the same time, I can connect because we both grew up as Cubs fans. I can connect to it. I can connect to a fan base hungry to win. I can feel a fan base wanting a winner, especially when you put in the payroll that you did and you paid the manager. It is the perfect combination of, I was telling somebody this earlier, it is the perfect combination of slumping and injury. It is just a perfect storm that is derived because you cue some of those injuries that just don't happen. If Merriweather's healthy for the year, this is a first place team. It's just, and that's the weirdest thing to say. If somebody's listening to this and has no knowledge of the Cubs and just sees they're in last place, they think I'm crazy saying this, but this is a first place team. If things just go their way in a few situations and a few of those leads are not blown. So, yeah, I mean, it's a challenge. You put in the money, you put in the time, you brought back the guys that you needed to, Belly, and you signed Dansby that long contract, and you thought Chris Morel is probably like to have that average, in the 240s or 250s, but it just hasn't happened. So I don't know. I wish I could wave a magic wand and say, hey, this is where you fix it, but it's just kind of a spiral that all started with a really tough injury to one of your better bullpen guys, and it's been there since.
Yeah, I appreciate that because, sometimes when you expose your brain to the Twitter vacuum, you start to wonder if you're the one that's insane for thinking differently because things can get loud in that vacuum. And I think I've been trying to sit on the causal connection of the downfall. And you really do look at timing and different strategy of how players rehab versus how they don't, slumps, and all these things have happened at such a very unique, similar moment that it has created this situation where they have survived one-run games this year that they shouldn't have, and then they've been presented with one-run games because of a multitude of all these other factors. So they keep finding themselves in the same situation, but instead of the three guns they expected at the end of the game, they have butter knives, and they're trying to find the tool to wrap it up. And every time they find something that might click, there's another injury. I mean, there's the Rolodex of pitchers that have gotten opportunities. Daniel Palencia, Keegan Thompson has been on and off. And, 2 years ago, we were penciling him in as the next Josh Hader, 2 innings shut down. And he's had some health and control issues. And add Brett Alzolay, the question becomes, obviously the stuff is not elite stuff when it comes to velocity, but the slider's always been good. And with the arm issue and the extent that he's been out, how long was he dealing with that issue? And fans seem to think that these are things that are figured out overnight or stubbornness, but these are also adults and human beings who are trying to put their best foot forward and not thinking that there's something wrong until somebody takes a look and they find out something is wrong. So yeah, I think you can explain most of May with another Bellinger rib injury that might still be affecting the way he swings. And he's a big part of the middle of the lineup. And another oblique injury for Seiya Suzuki, a knee injury that has sapped the power out of Dansby Swanson, and his hunger for longevity and being the guy that's there every day. He doesn't do rehab stints. So you have to account for that he was adjusting back to major league pitching after missing a large amount of time. And Nico's had a partially broken hand and a hamstring issue. And we started the year with Ian Happ with a hamstring issue. So they were throttling him and out at DH. Health has been a huge issue for this team. And they have survived is more than they have won. And it's hard to look back, and if they had one more of those pieces in that bullpen and converted half of those blown saves, they're 2 games behind the Brewers.
Right.
And but the good news is this division is not great and there's time. But I think that when things aren't working, there's a impatience that comes, and it's an impatience that grew from 2016. This is a new fan base, has new expectations. It is not like the team that we cut our teeth on of, hey, guess what? They made the playoffs 3 times my whole youth. And you had your one hand and 3 numbers to mention, and that was it. Yeah. But then from 2015 to 2020, this was a team that was regularly over 500 and competing for the division. And the frustration came when they blew it in the playoffs. And that is just a completely new world. And that is where a lot of the Twitter fan base is from. They don't, and the Rickett family and all the finger pointing. So it is. I tend to strongly agree with where you're landing. This is we can't point fingers at one thing or one person. It has been a comedy of if they could get with Doc Brown in the time machine and they're Marty, come on, and go back and heal one guy, it changes the whole season. And that it feels ridiculous. And yeah, so if given that, what's the situation with the Cubs? And I have a feeling that I could sense your answer, but maybe it's different. There's a few glaring problems with the major league club. Which one to you is the biggest issue that sticks out to you that they need to address? in order to turn this thing around?
Well, first, I appreciate the Back to the Future reference. That's my favorite movie. So we're finding out by the minute that we have more and more in common. But no, I think, you know what? I think, well, let me add one thing. I think Jamison Tyone has completely flipped the script from his last year. I mean, he has been terrific. So
the fact we're not talking about him should be enough of a testament of like how different he has been.
I mean, if not for, the Steele injury to start the year and maybe some other things that didn't go your way in the rotation, I mean, that'd be a bright spot in all of baseball. So I think Tyone's been great. Shota has struggled a little bit, but there's no question he's going to find it with his work ethic, and hopefully Jay Steele can just kind of round into form and just get fully healthy. I think the return of Kyle Hendricks has been cool to watch after how professional he was and going to the bullpen, and I mean, just a stand-up guy, 10 years of big league service. How about that? But yeah, I mean, to get back to your question, I think just based on
the Hendricks jersey on my wall.
Oh, there you go.
Hendricks. This is a Hendricks, Kyle Hendricks pod, and just another endorsement of we analyzed while he was struggling that he needed to increase the curveball usage in order to find success. And there's been all these articles of late, and we've been trying to be like, hey, like maybe he listens to our podcast. Like maybe he like heard this random guy who named his son after Kyle Hendricks. True story. That's what I did. And it's like, I got to check this out. And he's like, oh, he said curveball, so I'm going to do it. So that's the story we're going to stick to.
I love it. But yeah, I mean, if we're talking about what you got to fix, I think, I had Boog Shambi on my radio show in Indy a couple weeks ago, and he made a good point. It's just the lineup can't possibly stay like this all year. If you're just talking about the means of a season, it's truly improbable to think that the lineup can be like this. So that'll find its way out. I do think you're just going to have to find the perfect storm to work in the bullpen. And I know it's June 27th, and that's so difficult to find midseason bullpen help without giving up a big prospect. But also the fact that Ben Brown has been hurt. I think there are some guys in the minors that can truly help you out. I think a name that why not take a crack at it if you have the ability and you get a 40-man spot available, Michael Arias. If you're looking for velocity and you're looking for nastiness, this guy is wicked. I mean, he was a shortstop as of 4 years ago. He pitched in South Bend last year as a starter. Now he's on the big league fast track, just like Danny P., just like Luke Little, just like Porter Hodge. They've done the exact same thing with him. I think Porter's been a nice addition to the pen.
Yes.
Luke will find his game. There's no question. Luke's too good. He is going to figure it out, and he is going to be a great piece from the left side of that pen. But there's a guy at AAA. Give Michael Arias a crack. The worst thing that can happen is he walks a few dudes. If you're looking for nastiness and here's what you're looking for. You're looking for somebody in that other dugout to say, who is that and how do we hit that? That's Michael Arias. If he walks a few dudes, figure it out. Fall on the sword. I would be in full support of Arias coming up because that is something you just truly don't have right now. Just the electrified fastball, 100 miles an hour, wicked slider from the right side. I am team Michael Arias.
Yeah, I think that's a name that that I look at. Hunter Biggie, another one, and Ethan Roberts. But I could also understand the apprehension, especially with Roberts and Biggie, both of them coming off of some injuries. There's probably other things at play, and concern of their use at the major league level and how much their usage would increase given the very obvious need of those things in the current bullpen. So yeah, I think that is definitely a frustration. I will give the Nick Madrigal got injured, it feels like a few weeks ago in his AAA game, broke his wrist, and he's still not on the injured list the last I checked, and that would open up a 40-man spot, which would give an opportunity to a bullpen guy. So it's that kind of mismanagement. We don't obviously know the full story of how they're addressing these things. And, the Cubs signed a reliever that was already on the West Coast. That was DFA from the A's today. And, he's going to be able to be there today, given, you used Hayden Wesneski extended in yesterday's game, dating this podcast, obviously, as the 27th. But, yeah, I think those are the things that are interesting that like folks are getting more frustrated about as the games continue to not go well. And yeah, it's definitely a challenging time. I think as a fan, every fan has a right to be angry about things because that's your right as a fan. But I think that there is plausible, reasons on why this has happened. And, at the end of the day, like, it would not shock me if we were talking about the Mets and the Astros as trade targets for the Cubs 30 days ago. And now neither one of them will be trading guys because they are both in the playoff hunt because they had one good month. So it's like, it could happen to us. Like and that sounds insane, but like it really could. And there is a stretch at the end of July and August where the Cubs will be playing teams that are not really trying very hard to win stuff. That'll be an opportunity for them, if they find some momentum to stack some wins. And, there is time, and I know that there's a lot of calls for major change in moving outfielders and such from the fan base. And yeah, like, I don't think that's something that happens in the middle of the season. You're not making major roster choices at the trade deadline unless you're looking to add that missing piece. So if this continues, I think it's going to be a very interesting offseason for the Major League Club.
Yeah, I mean, how many times did Craig Counsell's Brewers make that September run? I mean, I think back to 2018 when Javi was having his MVP caliber year, and Christian Yelich comes around the turn 4 and passes him for the MVP. And I'll never forget that month. That was my first year broadcasting in the Cubs org. So I'm getting ready as like, hey, playoff run my first year. That's cool. I get to kind of see this up close. And then obviously the Brewers came where they did. So I think, hey, Craig's got a proven track record that a September comeback is possible. And the most beautiful part about that is we're only about to hit July. So like you said, it takes 1 month. You just got to find a way to get as healthy as possible. And if you can, you go from there. This is a multi-step approach. You just don't start winning ball games. I think the focus has got to be health, and then you got to go inning by inning. I mean, this is Ryan, man. I mean, this is not just you show up and you win a ball game. This is an inning by inning battle. And you just need all hands on deck.
Well, the good news, and up to the minute, the Cubs are winning currently 3-0. So maybe today, maybe this recording is the turning point. Before I let you go, just take some time. It sounds like you have a radio show. Obviously, you're the play-by-play for the South Bend Cubs. Like, plug some stuff that you're doing so folks can find you on social channels or radio shows or other podcasts if they're looking for more stuff from you and the South Bend Cubs.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Well, first of all, we were talking about this off the air. If anybody ever is at a South Bend Cubs game, come say what's up. Broadcast booth is right on the concourse, so anybody listening is always welcome to drop by and say hello. I love what I do. It's my 5th season here, so I've had a great run, a couple championships, and like we talked about at the start of this, man, I mean, my ultimate goal is to be up at Wrigley and hopefully calling games for that club, and going to keep on working until I hopefully get there one day. I love what I do. And like you said, in the off season, do some radio down in Indianapolis with 107.5 The Fan. So in the off season, you can catch me on air there every day. And then also broadcast some college basketball and football in the off seasons as well. So last season got Indiana State. They just missed the tournament, obviously. So did a bunch of their games, and that was fun to do. I mean, that was an electric team to cover. So enjoyed that very much. But yeah, other than that, on Twitter at BKingSports, Instagram and TikTok is Brendan King Show. And always like to post some content from the booth, post some fun calls, and what else is going on in South Bend. So it's been a fun run, and looking forward to plenty more W's in the future.
Yeah, let's take one moment to air some frustration at the NCAA committee for leaving Indiana State out of that. That was ugh. I am a Missouri Valley basketball guy. My alma mater is Valparaiso, which has struggled since they've entered the Valley. We're not going to go into that, but that Indiana State team was very, very good, and it was very frustrating as a fan that thought we'd get 2 teams in the tourney that they did not get their shake, and that. Oh,
Yeah,
and then
that first 4 games.
things have changed over the for the season.
Yeah,
Is
watching Virginia in the first 4, you're like, oh my God, these guys are supposed to be better than Indiana State.
correct, yes. And they this is not a college basketball, but like all the things that they're supposed to do, net ranking and stuff, they were better than like 7 or 8 teams that were in the tournament. And yeah, but always not helping the little guy. On that note, for a completely different podcast, thank you so much for joining us. This is Brendan King, the play-by-play and voice of the South Bend Cubs. Check out the South Bend Cubs. Go to a game out of Four Winds Field. Super fun time, great atmosphere. I loved the branding. I have a bunch of South Bend Cubs hats in my house, including some Marvel variants and a bunch of fun things. Love the Studebaker references. For those who don't know, the Studebaker used to be produced in South Bend, hence the immersion of the Cubs brand with that call to the area. If you're in the Chicago area, it's a very quick drive, especially if you know Notre Dame football. Right there, right off that highway. Go check it out today. Thank you, Brendan, so much for your time.
Always appreciate you having me.